Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at strings implementation in Python. So we're going to figure out what strings are as a data type, and then we're going to go over some of the methods which come out of the box for strings. Let's go here. I already have my Jupyter notebook open. Wait, let me adjust this mic. Make sure that it's getting the right sound. So we're going to start with strings, then we'll go to dictionaries, tuples, lists. We'll focus on the data structures, the basic data structures first, and then we'll go into functions, if-else statements, object-oriented programming, and things like that. So a string in Python essentially is a sequence of characters. So in Python, you have the sequence data type, so things like the list, which is an array as well, tuple, things like that nature are sequences. But when you come to a string is a sequence of characters. So for example, if we say something like my name, okay, so let's say my name is, of course, this is what my name is, Olabode Alamo. So that's my name over there. Now with that, this is a string. So everything in the name, that's my first name and my last name with the space in between, is actually a string. Let me see if I can increase this size so it'll be easier for you to see. Okay, this should be better. Okay, so that shows that's a string. Now with Python, you can do a whole bunch of things with strings. And the reason for this is because string data type is represented in several ways in Python. So, okay, let me adjust that. You always come across strings in a lot of your applications, and so knowing how to handle strings is really important. So we have this string, which is my first name and my last name. I can decide to determine what is the length of everything in there. So length, and for that we're going to use, of course, we're going to use a print statement, but in a Jupyter notebook we don't need to use print statement. We're going to use the len function. So len name. So it shows that there are 13 characters. So of course, if you count this, that's 7 plus 5, that's 12, then including the space in between, that makes it 13. So this is how you know the length of a string. There are other things you can do. So let's say you have a string and you want to get a particular character out of that string of characters. You can easily do that by indexing the string. So to be able to index a string, one thing you just need to know is in Python, strings are 0 indexed. So what that means is that the first character in a string starts from the position 0. So usually when we count from 1 upwards, but in programming and in Python, of course some other languages do different things, but in Python, it starts from 0. So for example, if I wanted to say, okay, what is the first character in my name? I'll use the square brackets and use the number 0. And it shows me, oh, that's the first. Now, if I wanted to show the last, I could do something similar. But in this case, there are two ways I can do this one. The easy way is just do -1. And to show you the U, so that's the last character. Another way this could be done is I could easily use the length of it. I could easily do this, say name. I know that it's 13 characters. So if you're starting from 0 and you have 13 characters, you're going to get up to 12. But of course, you don't want to be memorizing that, right? So you can easily do name, square brackets, length of name minus 1. And this works as well. So essentially, length of name, like we've seen before, is 13. Subtract 1 from him, that's 12. And then it indexes position 12. So that's really cool. So we've figured out how to calculate the length or to measure the length of a string. We can come here and modify the strings. So let's do string modification. So let's say I want all the characters in my name to be uppercase. I could do, of course, you can put a print statement, name dot upper. And it shows my first name and last name in uppercase. Of course, if we print out the name here, it doesn't change it. So you see the name is still as it was previously. So of course, if we wanted this to be stored, we could have stored this name.upper in a variable. So let's do the reverse of that. Let's take it all down to lowercase. Okay, and that's it in lowercase. Olabode Alamu lowercase. So there are several other functions. So this just shows upper and lowercase. So we can just put that up here. Specify that it's a markdown. Lower and uppercase. Okay. So we have uppercase and lowercase. Now, what if we had a string that we wanted to split the string based on a particular character? So let's say I want to provide my names. So I have a bunch of names. Let's say, okay, let's put this splitting a string. Let's change this to let's say we want to split a string. So let me just provide my names, or maybe not my names, provide English names. So John, Alice, Olivia, Monique. So those are names. Now, looking at this is a list. Okay, so if I wanted it to be a string instead, my bad, I use the list instead. Let me do this. Just make it one single string. Yeah. We're gonna get to lists in future lecture. So for right now, let's just focus on so let's say we have a string of different names: John, Alice, Olivia, Monique. Ideally, if you want to store something like this, you might want to use a list instead. So that's why I instinctively just use that. But that's fine. Let's assume we have this. I want to separate this string into a list by splitting it from a separator. So in this case, let's say we want to separate this string into smaller strings based on the position of the comma. we can do split. So split, it does what you expect it to do. It splits it, and what you see as the result is a list of the strings in there split by the comma. So in between every comma, it just separates it out. So let's check the type of this one. Type, and it's a list. So what that does is the split function takes in a string and returns a list. So that's really cool. Okay. We can use the original name. We can use this variable, and instead of splitting based on comma, we can split based on the space character there. So let's do the same thing. Name dot split. Okay, and now I want to split it based on the space, and that's what we have there. So we have my first name and my last name. So that's the split function. So there are several other functions here. We've looked at splitting, we've looked at upper and lower case, we've gone over getting specific characters. Let's look at string slicing. So slicing, like the name suggests, is you're taking something bigger and you're making it into smaller chunks. So for slicing, this is what it is. Let's say we want to slice in the string. We want to slice the string. So we have the string name. Let's say I want to get the first 3 letters of name. So let me just print this out instead, so that it will be compatible as a Python file. So let's say I want to get the first 3 letters, OLA. So that's position 0, 1, and 2. To slice it, we're going to use a square bracket as well. Now the only difference is, for you to slice, you specify the beginning and the end as well. So let's say we want the first 3 letters. We're going to specify 0. So I'm telling Python, okay, start your slicing from position 0, that's the letter O, beginning of the name, up until the number 3 position, but do not include number 3 position. So let me show you what that is. Now look at it as this. It starts from 0, 1, 2, but it doesn't include the 3. So the last parameter here, or this number 3, is not included in the slice, and that's the way slicing the string works. It just starts between the 2 numbers. The second number is excluded from the slice. So this is it. Let's say I want to just get the first 5 letters. Now let me show you that it's not necessary for me. If I'm starting from the beginning, I don't need to specify position 0. Okay, so let's do position. I left that blank and I said first 5. So this is what it looks like, right? The first 5 characters. And the same thing if I'm trying to go from position 5 downwards to the end of the string. It's easy for me to just do this, okay? Specify the starting position and don't specify the end, because I want it to go all the way to the end of the string. And this is what it is, okay? So it starts from position 5, and if we check position 5, DE, that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5. So it starts from the D and goes that way, D Alamo. Very funny. Yeah, so these are some of the functions which you're going to use more often when it comes to strings. Let's go into replacing string. So we can do this, because sometimes you might have a string substring in a string. So we want to replace a substring in a string, or you want to just replace a character in a string. It really doesn't matter. So I'll start with the name. So name, of course, this is what we had previously. Let me print this out. So the thing is, when you're working in a Jupyter environment, you don't need to use the print keyword because it just prints out the value automatically. So let's say I want to replace every letter O with, let's say, letter B. How do I go about doing that? Or let's say I want to replace with another, let's say another vowel. Let's replace all the O's with a U. To do that, I'll just go say name dot replace. So you say what you want to replace. So small letter O. I want to replace it with U's. Now you notice in this result, it was able to replace the small letters O and replace it with a U. You notice the big letter O was not affected. And this is why you have that lower function in string. So usually before you do any process in a string, if you feel like there are capital letter and small letter of each characters, you could put them first in a uniform format and then replace. So let me show you what that means. So for example, if I want to first make this lower and then I want to replace all the O's with U. Now you can see it becomes different here because I was able to chain all these functions together. So first I lowered it and then I replaced it. So with string methods, you are able to chain several of them together. Okay. So yes, this is what it looks like. You can see all the letter O's are replaced with U's, and that's what it is right here. So we've looked at replacing substring in a string. We've looked at slicing a string, splitting a string, creating lower and uppercase. There are a bunch of other functions you can do when working with a string. So we're going to look into some others here. So let's say I have my string, which is first name and last name, and I want to find out how many O's do I have in this name. Of course, in this case, it's very easy because it's a short string. Assuming you had a string 1 million characters long, it would be nearly impossible for you to count by yourself. So let's call this counting characters string. Okay, let me change this to Markdown. Okay. So let's say I want to count number of times the letter O shows up in that string. So I could say name.count. Oh, my bad. Okay. And when I look at the doc string for this function, it says it returns the number of non-overlapping occurrences of string start and end, interpreted size, slice mutation. Cool. Okay, so let's say I want to count the number of times the letter O shows up here. You can see it shows once, right? That's because when you look at the name, the letter O, the small letter O is found only once. I could also do something different. I can first convert them all to lower and then count number of times small letter O shows up. And you can see it shows twice, and that's because we first take the name, make it all lowercase, and then count number of times the small letter O shows up. Okay, so this is how you can count. You can also count not just a single character in a string, but like a group of characters. So for example, looking at my name, you can see that there's LA and there's LA. So I could decide, okay, you know what? Let me count the number of times I have the group of characters L and A in this. So I could do the same thing. I could say name.count LA. And it shows up twice. So this is a very useful function because sometimes when you make your own applications, you might be interested in knowing the number of times a certain phrase or group of characters shows up. So that in itself is really cool. That's really, really cool. So counting, we've done replacing substring. There are a bunch of functions. I believe these are the more commonly used ones. We could also use the find method, right? So another thing we could do is to check. So carry out checking content of a string. Okay, you can do that as well. Let's say one check content of a string. An example where this could be used, let's print name. Now you might want to check, okay, do we have the phrase BODE in this string? Okay, so to do that, we can just use the in operator. So we're going to use the in operator. And of course, this is a reserved keyword in Python. You can say BODE in name. So if that group of character exists in the name, it will return true. If it doesn't, it will return false. So you can see it returns true because BODE is in my name. So let's change this. Let's say we put F in there. And let's see what it's going to return. False. So yeah, this is really useful, in case you want to check for the existence of a group of characters in a name or not. So for example, let's say you have email address variable, and let's say you store someone's email in this variable. Let's say superman@gmail.com. Okay, so we have that. One thing you might want to do is you might want to check, okay, you know what? Let me see if there is Gmail in this string. Okay, and that's a very useful thing you might want to do. So you could say Gmail in Superman. No, sorry, in email. And it says true. So you can see how this could be used. So let's say you just wanted to get people's Gmail, or you wanted to separate Gmails from Yahoo Mails or whatever you want to do. You can easily just use this in operator to check if Okay, so this is how it is. For you to use this join method, you have to first specify the substring you want to use to join the different strings in the iterable. So this is a list. It could have easily been a tuple or some other iterable like that. So we just chose to use list. And so if I wanted to just join all of this, Olabode, John, Alamo into one string, and I needed to specify what I needed as what was going to join them together, then this is what the join function is used for. So say, for example, I want to do this. Instead of joining it with the exclamation points, I want to join it with that. So you can see this is a very easy way of going from a list of strings to a single string. Okay, and that's what was done here. That's essentially what I did here. So let me bring this to a close. I'm going to link in the description a more extensive list of all the different functions you can use on a string. These are some of the most common things you'll be doing with a string. Defining a string, converting it to upper or lower case, splitting a string, that's also very common, knowing how to slice a string based on the index, replacing some elements of the string, counting characters in a string, things of this nature, checking the content of a string. These are very common things you'd use. Before we finish, let's just go into string operations. String, or let's just say string concatenation. So string concatenation is just a fancy way of joining strings together. So for example, if I want to add, let's say this string, my name is, I could use the plus sign and add this. So what it does is it just adds both strings together into one string. Now I could do it this way, or in this case, I could use string formatting instead. So string formatting. I could easily do this, and now this is really useful. I use this all the time. You could do dot format. So let's say instead of concatenating, I would put a placeholder here. Okay, and so what this format method does is it looks for the placeholder in the string and replaces it with whatever I provide here. So let's say I provide Ola. That's what it does. So wherever the placeholder is, it replaces it with my name or with whatever string I provide to the format method. Now you can do this with, let's say, you can do this multiple times. Let's say I want to say my first name is, and my last name is. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Let me copy that. I could format this with so this is using the format function of the string. Now you can see my first name is parentheses, and my last name is parentheses. So once I provide the format function to the string, I'm able to provide two arguments, that's first name and last name, that would fill this two placeholder spots. And so this is where it comes to. My first name is this, my last name is Alamo. Yeah, so this brings us to the end of strings, the part 1. I may go into part 2 where we look at more advanced string methods, but this first one is the more common strings you're likely to use while using Python. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also comment. Let me get your feedback on this so I can make it better next time. Thank you very much, and I'll see you there.